You want to jump into the Senate results?
Let's jump into the Senate. And okay, let's go ahead and take a look at everything there. The shock result, not even that close. Right now, AP and everybody calling it. John Fetterman for Pennsylvania. He's currently at 50.1%, 47% for Dr. Oz. Humiliating defeat, no question. Doesn't even come within the 2020 result, doesn't come within the 2016 stunning result against Hillary for Pat Toomey and for Donald Trump. So clearly, Dr. Oz flopped right on his face. Why does that matter? The abortion one is my major takeaway. Exit polls showing there, abortion was the #1 issue over inflation by almost a 10-point margin. So we will get some more verified exits in the coming days, of which I'm really going to take a lot of time to scrutinize. Fetterman's overperformance is one of the biggest and most important data points for 2024. So let's hold that in our discussion.
So let's pause there for a moment. First of all, I have to chuckle at the fact that after losing to Joe Biden and now losing to John Fetterman, Republicans have now lost consecutive elections to men who basically can't talk.
Listen, I have a lot to say on this that I will save for the 2024 segment. Joe Biden's looking pretty good right now. For 2024.
Yes, he is.
I never thought I'd be at this desk saying that, but
speaking of humiliation, this is in some ways like a real repudiation of a lot of the Trump era politics, because you have John Fetterman, who we all watched the debate, difficult, hard to watch, really, performance after suffering a stroke and still very much being in the midst of recovering from that, up against Dr. Oz, who was a literal Oprah-made TV star.
That's right.
And
I thought he was going to be a star. I'm on record saying it. I really did.
And I did too. Yeah. I really did. It turns out Carrie Lake actually had more of the qualities we expected Dr. Oz to have, and we'll see if she hangs on for governor there, which kind of defies, what happened in the rest of the country if she is able to hang on. But if you look at, New York Times has this map of, what were the shifts in margin across the state. And most of the maps that I looked at, even in places like New Hampshire where Democrats did really well, there were a lot of blue arrows showing that, okay, Democrats did outperform in these areas. But there were also red arrows in the rural areas where Republicans outperformed. Pennsylvania is not like that. John Fetterman outperformed in basically everywhere in the entire state. And so abortion, yes. #1 issue in the exit polls. There was a danger that Republicans end up with the governor's mansion and both legislatures. I think voters felt that very acutely, like this was really on the line. So I do think that that is very important. But I also think, Fetterman does have that everyman appeal. And he had roots in steel country. And so he not only hangs on, given the precarity of his health situation, he ends up being one of the best Democratic candidates in the entire country, which is something that we expected early on before the stroke happened, because he has such a great, working man, everyman appeal, in touch with people, really feels like he gets the struggles of the working class and connects in a way that feels authentic. And at the same time was very effectively, and I think ultimately decisively, painting Oz as this out-of-touch elitist, Hollywood elitist. And that ends up mattering way more than concerns over his health. And I would even go so far as to say, and I was saying this at the time, the Oz strategy around his health really backfired, because it just made Oz look like an asshole, and it made Fetterman a more sympathetic character, actually.
It's very possible. Yeah, look, no offense to Pennsylvania, but, data shows it's an old and not particularly healthy state. So it's not like, people can't empathize. There's so much to say on Pennsylvania. Let's continue also in Georgia. So where do things stand right now? So we have the 96% of the vote, which is currently in. We have 153,000 remaining outstanding ballots. Raphael Warnock currently holds 49.2% of the vote with 1,941,000 votes. Herschel Walker has got 48.7% of the vote, 1,922,000. So we have a 20,000 vote difference between the two candidates, just to show you how tight it is. And we have 153,000 ballots remaining to be counted. Now, where exactly that count is all coming from, I will not speculate as to how much exactly is in. It clearly is going to come to a game of inches. The exact analysis I've seen so far, Krystal, tell me if you've seen anything else, is that this is almost certain to go to a runoff because there does not appear to be enough outstanding ballots, given the breakage, for Warnock to be able to pull over 50%. Although that remains within the realm of possibility, things would just have to to break so far in his direction that it seems unlikely at this point.
Yeah, that's what I've seen as well.
Yep.
I mean, there continues to be a lot of uncertainty about exactly what's out. Is it election day? Is it mail-in? Where is it? So it's hard to say for certain. But what looks most likely to happen, with Raphael Warnock right now sitting at 49.4% of the vote, and remember, he has to get to 50 to avoid the runoff, what looks most likely to happen is Warnock gets the most votes, but does not avoid the runoff. So we end up, again, in a situation with a Georgia runoff, again, potentially determining control of the Senate. And, you know, I mentioned it before, but I'll say it again, Herschel Walker really dramatically underperforming the top of the ticket. You know, this was a state that Republicans with a different candidate, with a different campaign, I think, you know, could have cleaned this up and won decisively last night. And instead, you have to take the risk of going to a runoff where all eyes are going to be on these two candidates. And we know that Herschel Walker does not hold up particularly well under scrutiny.
I'll pick up on that. Brian Kemp decisively won the election last night, not even close, 53.4% of the vote, 2.1 million votes to Stacey Abrams, 1.8 million. So she got completely clobbered, which is a story in its own right, something a little bit delicious.
Some of the
she
old
did concede,
Democratic
by the way.
stars.
Thank you, Stacey. You actually conceded the election this time. Props to you. I guess it was a little bit too incongruous if that weren't the case. Let's keep going down on the Senate map. I just want to say North Carolina, there were some early questions there, but it didn't end up being all that close at all. 50% of the vote to Budd, and only 47% of the vote to Beasley. So 3% margin.
That's honestly closer than I expected.
It's closer
though.
than we expected, certainly. I mean, North Carolina's a weird state, right? I mean, Obama, 2008, that kind of made the dream possible. It was always a question about Biden. Trump ended up winning it decisively. Then you also had, what was that guy, Cal Cunningham, really go down in flames in 2020. But Budd, he's in there. The Republicans did hold on to that seat. Ron Johnson right now, things look pretty good for Ron Johnson. It hasn't been officially called for him, but he's probably going to win, but the margin is not nearly as close as the last time that he won 6 years ago, Krystal. He's only got 50.5%. Mandela Barnes at 49.3%. So big overperformance for Mandela Barnes there relative to the last time that this happened. 2016, obviously, was a huge upset when Trump won Wisconsin, so there's something to be said there. Do you want to add anything on Wisconsin?
I just wanted to say, again, pay attention because the Midwest was consistent outperformance for Dems.
Yes, yeah.
Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. I was just looking at Ohio. J.D. Vance wins, but I'm looking again at that New York Times map that shows the shift in the vote. The entire state, Tim Ryan outperformed where Biden was.
Right.
And so it was, again, a much narrower margin. He improves on it, claws back some of those red gains that have been made in recent years. And again, that, Midwest coming back into the Democratic fold, Ohio's not back in the Democratic fold, but shifting back in that direction, and Michigan and Wisconsin very definitively. That also goes against the kind of realignment inevitability narrative.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's continue in the map. Ohio, as we already said, J.D. Vance winning there, pretty decent margin, 53%, 46% for Tim Ryan. Tim Ryan did certainly overperform. Mike DeWine just blew it out in Ohio. He got 62% of the vote, 37%. So a lot of ticket splitters there, but JD ended up winning approximately the same percent by around 8 points there right now. That's what Trump won it by.
New York Times says he'll win ultimately by 6.6.
Okay, so he underperforming Trump a little bit there.
He underperformed Trump. And again, you see Tim Ryan overperforming really across the state, urban, rural, suburban, doing better than what Biden did in the state of Ohio.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's continue in the Senate. So Arizona, all eyes right now on Arizona. So they do not have nearly the same amount of the vote in. They have 68%. We have remaining ballots, 832,000 remaining ballots. So that's a lot because I'm about to read you what the current ballots are. Mark Kelly has got 51.9% of the counted vote right now, 918,000 ballots. Blake Masters has 45.9%, 811,000. So we still have 800,000 votes to count. So many votes. There will be mail-in. Some of it will be early vote. Remains to be seen. I have not seen any compelling analysis right now which shows me that Blake Masters has a great chance at coming back and winning this.
Yeah.
But it's not totally out of the question right now. It's leaning Dem heavily in Mark Kelly's favor, I think we can say.
Yeah, I mean, this one looks pretty good for Mark Kelly, barring something like pretty surprising ultimately unfolding, because you still have a good chunk of the vote in Maricopa County out.
Right.
That is where, the expectation is that the bulk of the votes will come from. And right now, Mark Kelly is winning Maricopa County 53% to 45%. So, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty solid for the Democrats there. Like they're going to ultimately be able to win. Blake Masters, weak candidate. Mark Kelly, very strong candidate. And, Mark Kelly definitely outperforming Katie Hobbs at the top of the ticket. And we'll get to the governor's races in a bit.
That's right. Okay, so Nevada, also major eyes on Nevada. So 80% of the vote that's in, we got 211,000 votes remaining to be counted. 49.9% for Adam Laxalt, 47.2% for Catherine Cortez Masto. But, and here's the huge but, Krystal, let's go ahead and tell everybody about Clark County, the remaining mail-in ballots that remain to be come in, and those are heavily Democratic.
Okay, so John Ralston, who is the guru, really respected by Republicans and Democrats, has, remained quite nonpartisan. His math is at this point that if there are, I'm quoting from his Twitter feed, if there are 100,000 mail ballots left in Clark County, which is where the bulk of the population is, that's where Las Vegas is, which would make sense, he says, based on turnout there. And if the Dems win that by a 2-to-1 margin, which is what they've won it by so far, so if trends continue, then Catherine Cortez Masto could come back to win. So that is the Democratic incumbent. He then says it's more uphill for Sisolak, that's the Democratic governor, but he's not quite dead yet. Also, we have 16,000 mail-in votes from Washoe County, which is more Republican. So this one, really hard to say what direction it's ultimately going to go in. Laxalt obviously has the lead right now. I'm sure he would love to stop the count, but nobody knows exactly how many mail-in ballots here. Nobody knows if they're going to go for Democrats in the same proportion that they were going for Democrats ultimately. So Nevada's the state where there are kind of the biggest question marks.
It's going to take a while. I don't think we're going to know Nevada now for a couple of days. Same thing in Arizona. I read this last night, which is disgraceful. Maricopa County says, we'll have 99% of the ballots counted by Friday. It's like, come on. You guys had 2 years to get your act together. Then the voting machines go down in Maricopa. Now you need 3 days in order to count what's going on. It's like you couldn't cook up, like a Stop the Steal dream. And I expect Carrie Lake, in her speech last night, she was talking about shenanigans and all of that. Unfortunately, we will be grappling with that, I think, in the days to come. However, on the Senate side, which is what we're sticking with right now, let's spend some time on 2 races which in the red tsunami would have gone in that direction. Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire, as you said, bad night for Republican pollsters who had her only up by 1 point.
Well, mainstream pollsters had her up by 1.
Okay.
Republican pollsters had the other dude winning.
That's right. They had Bolduc. Well, guess what, guys? She's winning by 10 points with 90% of the vote, which is in right now. Maggie Hassan, 53.9% of the vote. Don Bolduc at 44.2% of the vote with only 59,000 votes that remain outstanding. She absolutely crushed him in New Hampshire. Here's another one, Washington. In the red tsunami scenario, Washington was very much in play. I heard rumors on election morning that Patty Murray was actually pretty worried, not even close. So 56% of the vote that's in, because there's a lot of mail-in ballots that remain to be counted, but she's already been called the winner by the AP. She's crushing Tiffany Smiley, 56.9% to 42%. Like, not even in the realm of possibility. So those are almost as significant to me as the close election wins, just to show you how big the polling misses were in some of these states. Washington, there was not a lot of polling. It was closer than some people thought, but just underscores to us that the Dems so majorly outperformed their polls last night.
Well, it does give credence to something else that I was very dismissive of leading up to Election Day, which is this notion of Republicans flooding the zone with partisan, low-quality polls that show outperformance for them and don't match up with reality. Real Clear Politics, which we use a lot, to just show, okay, neutral, no like Nate Silver fancy analytical model. What are the polls saying right now? They had the Washington Senate race that you just said Patty Murray's like set to win by like 15 points. They had that as a toss-up.
See?
They had the Colorado Senate race where Democrats are winning by like 13 points. They had that as a toss-up. The Maine governor's race, where Democrats are said to win by 13 points, they had that as a toss-up. So, this idea that was being spread by a lot of Democratic partisans that these Republican-leaning pollsters were skewing the averages and making it so that the Senate races appeared a lot different and put a lot more states into play than were really in play. It turns out to be accurate in terms of this election and how things ultimately unfolded. The mainstream pollsters were a lot closer to reality in this race, even as, some of the mainstream pollsters in some of these states, they also underestimated the Democrats. This was something that Nate Silver was sort of speculating about beforehand, effectively saying if there is this dynamic of they underestimate the Democrats, which is different from the past election cycles, it'll be because they've kind of internalized like, okay, these polls are overestimating the Democrats. We got to account for that in some of our decision making. Yep. And maybe they go too far in the other direction. I mean, that is one plausible explanation for how they missed, in particular in New Hampshire and Pennsylvania were like some of the bigger, and I would say the Midwest were some of the bigger misses.
Something coming clear to me too in the Senate picture was that, guys, Senate confirms judges. So I think that's also why abortion very likely had a major impact in some of these Senate races. They have to confirm the Supreme Court, right? I mean, that was a major thing.
I would say more than that, it's the fact that Republicans were out there floating a national abortion ban.
You're right.
Lindsey Graham did them no favors. Mike Pence. I mean, there was a whole slew of them. Yep. Blake Masters in his primary. I mean, a lot of mainstream Republicans with power and with potential power out there like, yeah, if we get power, this is what we're doing. And, there was good reason for voters to believe them ultimately, given their track record of continuing to move in that direction. So I do think as we get a couple days out and do some of the exit poll analysis and whatever, I do think some of the regional variation will depend on how much voters really felt like abortion was at risk with their vote this election, which again, I would say in New York, because you have Democratic control of the House and the Senate, there was a sense that you could kind of, this wasn't really existential in the state. This wasn't really totally on the ballot. And so they voted for some Republican members of Congress. But in a state like Pennsylvania, where there was a possibility of trifecta Republican control, it was a very, very different scenario ultimately.
I think you're right. Yeah, look, stunning takeaway on the Senate. Right now, as things stand right now, where you and I are filming this, Democrats have 48 seats, Republicans have 47. We have several that are still outstanding. However, the probability is that Dems could keep the Senate. What would you peg it at percentage-wise? I'd give them, 60%, something like that?
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Okay, so you've got three that are still out.
Right.
Georgia, Nevada, Arizona. Democrats have to win 2 of those.
Yes.
So,
which is not a bad bet right now.
No, and Arizona looks really pretty likely to go Democrat. So then you're talking about they got to win 1 out of Nevada and Georgia. If I had to say right now, I'd say they probably win them both. But Nevada is the one. I mean, they're both very uncertain because Georgia goes to runoff. Who knows what the national mood is there? Nevada, we don't know what mail is out. So either one of them could go either way. But yeah, you would much rather be the Democrats right now in terms of Senate control, in my opinion. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.